directly related to the right of all peoples to self-determination and their ability to choose their social, political, and cultural futures, which is directly undermined through the limitations of people's indigenous languages and the use of assimilation policies. Under authoritarian states, language is one of the first things to be attacked when repressing nations and peoples. But even democratic states employ more subtle assimilation policies, which are facilitated by globalization and technological change. To discuss these issues, the UNPO will host today unrepresented peoples from Catalonia, Kabylia, West Baluchistan, and the Khmer Krom to provide their different perspective on the impact of assimilation policies on their language and identity. We want to thank them all for their participation. And now I will give the floor to Nieves Cancela, the UNPO's advocacy officer, who will introduce briefly our speakers. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Elisenda, and thank you to our speakers and to the audience that has logged into our first webinar. We're all very excited. Before we begin, I'd just like to give a couple of quick remarks. Please note that the webinar will be recorded and may be shared on our website. Each of our speakers will provide insights from their perspective of the communities, shedding light on their situation and key challenges. At the end of the webinar, there will be no live Q&A. However, all participants are encouraged to share their comments, insights, and questions on the webinar chat, so our speakers can look at them and incorporate them into their closing remarks. So with that, let's get started. I'll start off by introducing our first speaker, Jordi Vilanova. Jordi will share insights on Catalonia. He is a translator and a former member of the Asamblea Nacional Catalana's board and currently an external collaborator of the ANC's International Commission. Please, Jordi, go ahead.
Oh, thank you very much for this opportunity to explain the situation here in Catalonia, but also in the Valencian country, which is a community to the south of Catalonia, and also to the islands, the Balearic Islands in the Mediterranean. We all share the same language and with the same problems because the dominating state is the Spanish state. I'd like to refer to what Elisenda referred to as well, which is which forms of government repress languages, minority or minoritized languages. A bit of history, Spain in particular, which is our dominant state, in its process of nation building in the 19th and early 20th century, the focus was, of course, on a unified nation, which means the repression of any language or ethnicity that does not coincide with their image of their nation. Okay, so that's why when you have multinational communities like Switzerland, for example, or even Finland, where Swedish is co-official throughout the state, that's not the case of Catalonia. In the case of Catalonia, although the Catalan language is official, it's known as being co-official in these three communities. Although we always insist that Spanish is also co-official because we share the official status in our territories. One of the issues, obviously, is education, where Catalan is official alongside Spanish. It is used as a medium of instruction in schools. And the educational system aims to promote bilingualism in general overall, ensuring that students are proficient in both languages. The issue we have here, of course, is that lately the Spanish judiciary has been trying to impose greater measures to what they say defend the Spanish language. Now, the issue here is that Catalan in the educational system has been used to educate and everyone, so that all school leavers are proficient in both languages. The problem is that the system has been eroded, and in fact, where all Catalan speakers are bilingual, not all Spanish speakers are bilingual. They don't all speak Catalan. What I'm referring to is of their origin. We'll get on to the issue of the immigration, which is a substantial issue here, because the children of immigrants, a large proportion come from Latin America, so their language, their mother language is of course Spanish. But we need to promote Catalan amongst all the linguistic communities here in Catalonia, so that everybody shares this identity of being Catalan citizens. The public administration, now Catalan can be used in the public administration, and citizens have the right to communicate with any administrative body here, whether of the local government or of the state government. However, the state government administrative bodies are reticent to recognize this right, and especially in spoken language, the right to use the language, and particularly to be addressed in our own language, is eroding. Official documents are typically available in both Catalan and Spanish, but the trend is, with the Spanish administration, for these to be predominantly in Spanish. As far as media is concerned, obviously there is Catalan government public television and radio network, and local radio and TV networks, which are predominantly in Catalan. However, the Spanish media, which also have presence in Catalonia, are much greater in terms of summed up. If you sum up all the audience there, so that people in Catalonia are much more exposed to the Spanish language than to the Catalan language, even though both the Catalan TV and radio have very large audiences and are often the predominant chain or stations. But as I say, the Spanish language stations have, if you sum them up there, they have a greater audience. I don't know how much time I have left. I don't know if I've overstayed my welcome, but
no, not at all.
Okay. So the legal framework for the use of Catalan is established in the Statutes of Autonomy, in the Estatut. All three territories, Catalan language territories, have their own statute, and in all three, the language is recognized as being co-official alongside the Spanish language. But in Valencia, for example, and now also in the Balearic Islands, the governments are run by the People's Party, which is very much Spanish nationalist. So particularly in Valencia, the language status of the language and the rights of the Catalan language speakers have been eroded. In Catalonia, the government is run by the Socialist Party, the Catalan branch of the Spanish Socialist Party. Now, here the treatment of the language is considerably better, although not ideal, obviously. There's a lot of work to be done. However, the Catalan government, the Catalan Generalitat government, before the European Union, for example, is pressing for the Catalan language to be an official language, with everything that goes along, the consequences, in other words, for packaging, pharmaceutical products, leaflets, a whole range of issues where Catalan will become more important. So this is very important for us. So the legal situation of Catalan could be much better. And the issue here is that it is not bad. The problem is that it is not defended as far as it ought to be. That's as far as the first issue goes. Now, the relationship between Catalan's right to self-determination and the preservation of the Catalan language. Well, I've covered certain issues there, but in general, the language and self-determination very often go hand in hand. The language is extremely important for the Catalans, and in the self-determination movement, the independence movement, let's say it outright, Catalan is key. The Catalan language is key, not simply an economic issue, it's also a cultural issue, not only an administrative issue, it's a linguistic issue as well. So the issue of the language and the defense of the language is extremely important. Historically, there have been better and worse periods. I mean, ever since the 1714 conquest by the Spanish and French armies of Catalonia, the language has been attacked, has been banned to several degrees. But in particular, we recognize that probably at least the worst in living memory was the Franco dictatorship, when only Spanish was recognized as the official language. So this suppression led to a decline in the use of Catalan in the public sphere, even though there are organizations that have defended the Catalan language even during the Franco dictatorship. One of these is Òmnium, which still exists today, and which has an important role to play as a sister organization of the Catalan Assemblea. Let's see, where else can I go?
Sorry, Julie. Before you conclude your presentation, I was going to ask if you could maybe share your insights on how the current situation of the Catalan language may impact or restrict on the community's culture and identity specifically.
Okay. Well, as I say, I mean, the context is difficult. Even though the general perception is that the Catalan language is fairly well protected, there are legal and political challenges. As I say, in Valencia, for example, legislation is being modified, the rights of Catalan speakers, the obligation of public servants to speak the language is being eroded, so that obviously the Catalan language or what they call Valencian is in the public sphere being challenged. That's very clear. The administrative use is not in its best situation. In Catalonia, however, the situation is somewhat better, and so that the legislative challenges, the legal challenges, are not as important. The issue here, I think, are the demographic changes. As I mentioned before, immigration is important. and the challenge here is for the administration to do a lot more to defend the Catalan language, particularly in education, at the universities, for example, because it's not so much the immigrants coming from Spain. We have many people even amongst the independence movement whose parents or grandparents or great grandparents were of Spanish origin of regions throughout Spain. Now we have an influx of people from elsewhere, as I mentioned earlier, from Latin America, whose mother language is Spanish, so that they are less motivated to learn Catalan, even though many of them do learn Catalan. And one of the issues we have here right now is that the Catalan administration is not doing enough to offer in Catalan language as a second language for new Catalan citizens, people who have come from elsewhere throughout the world, Indians from North Africa, from Latin America, etc. There's a demand from them, so that there are many people who do want to learn the Catalan language, but they don't have the channels or sufficient channels to be able to acquire the language.
Thank you so much, Jordi. Elisenda, would you like to add something?
Yeah, maybe you can comment, because this week language is the public debate, the main public debate in all Catalan media this week, because Catalan government published the results of the last poll on the use of language, and the situation has eroded in terms of social use of Catalan. Like now it's only 32% of Catalan citizens use currently Catalan as their main language. So it's reaching a point that is considered by social linguistics as a risky percentage.
Although
And,
the paradox, if I may quickly, the paradox is that there are more Catalan speakers than ever because the population has grown. So potentially, there could be a good horizon for Catalan, but more work needs to be done.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Jordi and Elisenda. Please feel free to share further comments in your closing remarks by the end, and hopefully the audience also contributes with questions and insights. Now we will go to our next speaker from Baluchistan. We welcome Taj Baloch. Taj is a poet, linguist, and a Baluchi editor. He is a founding chairman of the Human Rights Council of Baluchistan and has worked with the Baluchi Language Development Project at Uppsala University since 2015. Please, Taj, please take the floor.
Thank you very much. Thanks for inviting me to be part of this amazing people's discussion. Baluchi language actually plays a great role in the Baluch nationalism, what is so-called Baluch nationalism, for like after the British Empire left subcontinent, and they merged all the lands with the removed the borders and changed the marcation between different ethnic groups. And when they created Pakistan, before creation of Pakistan, they made four cuts of Balochistan. One, they made a cut on the region which was attached to Afghanistan, and they ruled it by themselves and called it British Balochistan. And one portion they gave to Afghanistan when they reached to an agreement with Russia. And then to Iran, they gave two portions of Balochistan with demarcations, new ones. That played a huge role in the situation of Baluchi language still today. The region which was called British Balochistan and was included in the map of Pakistan since the beginning, some parts of it has lost their language nowadays. They call themselves Baloch people, but they do not speak the language. and they have developed Saraiki language. And then the western part, which is included in Iran, the language is losing its domains day by day, and its importance even in the society. And people are trying to learn Persian to get better jobs, to get better education, because Baluchi is so demotivated by the state. And Baluchi language has been also facing a linguicide for years inside Pakistan as well. When I use as well, I mean this was the Balochistan, which is in Pakistan now, that played the key role in the national resistance from the colonial powers and the intellectual hub as well. So there has been war of identity. Either people are Pakistani or people are Baloch. And this war is still going on. There was a war in 1948 when Pakistan occupied Balochistan. Then there was another war in 50s, another war in 60s and 70s, and now it's going on more than 25 years now, which is the longest one. And along with the enforced disappearance of thousands of people and forced evacuation of villages, burning of the houses, and extrajudicial executions, there is a policy to suppress the language as well, because it is thought that language can be a central concept to mobilize the people with their ethnic identity. So there is no education in Baluchi. Even Balochistan is, they call it 54% of the land of Pakistan, and more than 50% of the natural resources the country has are coming from Balochistan. The strategic point which the country has is Balochistan, but there is no education in Baluchi, no media, no newspapers, no schooling, no academies. Apart from that, there is a tradition to attack the bookstores, which the students organize by themselves to promote their language. And there is self-publication from the student groups, many groups and literary groups, but they are always under attack. You can find in every university, every now and then that police and security forces have attacked a bookstall and seized all the books. And then again, this group has to start from the beginning to collect books and publish them and distribute them. Apart from Baluchi, Baloch people use other languages as well as their first language, like Brahwi, Jadgali, Saraiki, Ketrani, Dehwari, Lasi. So in this conflict of Baloch being a Baloch or being a Pakistani, Baluchi language has almost overcame the linguicide, because the generations which are raised in the war, they want to be proud of their identity, so they are using their own language, Baluchi. But the problem is with other 5-6 languages that Baloch people are using as L1 in different societies in different parts of Balochistan. Those languages are going to be more marginalized day by day, because the narratives are coming from two sides. A state narrative is coming from Urdu, Baloch nationalist narrative is coming in Baluchi, and sometimes in Brahwi. But other languages are dying of the Baloch people. And the current situation is like the colonial setup does not allow people to get a standard written system for the Baluchi language. Even there are more than 1,000 books every year, but everybody writes on its own way. And the dialects are going far away from each other. Like the western end of Balochistan, the variety of languages spoken in the western end is now almost alien to the eastern end of the land. So eastern dialect and western southern dialect and northern dialects are going to detach from each other more and more as they have to use the English and Baluchi words for the English and Urdu words for the new concepts, and it's not used as the communication, as a medium of instruction. In the administration, it's banned, and then there is no schooling of the language. So it's a fragile situation for the language of Baluchi itself. Even it is having the most political power from the public in the nationalist groups because of the state operations, not because nationalists have another power, but because when they think of, like, if someone's house is burned by someone, they naturally hate them, and hating them means they choose the other side. So they're gradually coming more towards the Baluchi language, but the situation of languages is still fragile, and the other languages which Baluchi speak, they are in a greater danger than the Baluchi language itself. And there are attempts here, I think. In Sweden, Uppsala University is the only university in the world which offers linguistic courses for Baluchi, and which is trying to create Baluchi English dictionary and some other tools to develop the language, and trying to work on the standardization of the language. But inside Baluchistan itself, even the people who are working in Uppsala University, they are also, most of the chances are even they cannot visit Baluchistan if they continue to work on Baluchi language. And some of most important people who were working for the promotion of the language, they were killed by so-called death squads, which they are called in Balochistan. Death squads are the criminal groups headed by members of the parliament. They help military to suppress nationalism and to counter the insurgents. And in turn, their head will be given any ministry in the parliament, and they can enjoy the impunity and use the power for whatever they want it. So there is a suppression, but the language in the public is rising. Thank you very much. And if there is anything you want me to clear, I can.
Thank you, Tash. Actually, on that note, and before we go on to the next speaker, do you have any recommendations or possible solutions that you would propose to address these challenges, specifically given your experience as a poet and editor?
I mean, suggestions always need the addressee. If I'm suggesting to the state, or I'm suggesting to what we can do together, these are two different things. We can do a lot because we are the people, and people are the power. We can do a lot, like we can join hands and join our resources and find the good trainings, be centralized, and create courses and syllabus and workbooks and distribute in all languages. That we can do. That's definitely possible, and it doesn't need a huge crowd of people. It needs just good people, even 5, 6 that work. And when it comes to the government, I think they are not going to listen if I suggest anything. The people have been fighting for 75 years and they have not listened, so still they will not listen to it.
Thank you, Tash. Again, if anyone would have any specific questions or comments for Tash, feel free to share on the chat. Now we will go on to our third speaker. We have with us Moni Mao, representing the Khmer Krom people. Moni has volunteered with the Khmer Kampuchea Krom Federation since the year 2000, serving as their vice president since 2012. So please, Moni, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for your warm introduction. Good morning from California, and good afternoon, good evening to everyone joining from where you are. I want to extend my heartfelt thanks to the UNPO for organizing this important webinar, for giving me the opportunity to speak on this critical issue. My name is Moni Mao. I'm the Vice President of the Khmer Kampuchea Krom Federation, an organization dedicated to advocating for the fundamental rights of the Khmer Krom, the indigenous people of the Mekong Delta, our homeland, known in our Khmer language as Kampuchea Kram. For centuries, our Khmer Kram lived in our ancestral land, the Mekong Delta, long before the modern border was drawn. However, despite the deep history, the Vietnamese government refused to recognize our Khmer Kram as indigenous people, just like the other indigenous people in the Central Highland, the Montagnard, or the Cham in the Central, or the Thai Dam, the Hmong in the North. Instead, they classify us as the ethnic minority, stripping us of the rights and protection afforded to indigenous people under international law. One of the most devastating consequences of this non-recognition is the systematic erosion of our language. Language is the heartbeat of our identity, culture, and spirituality. Yet, under the Vietnam aggressive assimilation policy, our Khmer Kram struggle to preserve our mother tongue. So today, let me begin with discussing the legal status and systematic suppression of the language in Vietnam. Vietnam officially recognized 54 ethnic groups, yet Vietnam remained the dominant and state-imposed language. The Khmer language lacked formal protection under Vietnamese law, and there's no meaningful government program to ensure its preservation. The following are the key examples of language suppression. The first one is about the limited education opportunity. So after many years, our organization advocate at the UN. So finally, our Khmer Kram children can learn 2 to 4 hours of our Khmer language in public school per week. This is not enough for achieve fluency to learn a new language or actually our mother tongue. As a result, most of our Khmer Kram youth today cannot read or write our Khmer language. Secondly, about the absence of the Khmer language in media. Despite the million of Khmer Kram people in the Mekong Delta, there is no Khmer language newspaper, magazine, or book published in our language. The legal document, public announcement, or government services are all conducted in Vietnamese. The third one is about the propaganda through the Khmer language program. Yet in Vietnam, there's some media that like TV program, but they broadcast in our language mostly for the propaganda. So many our people don't want to watch the kind of program. Beyond this restriction, our people even face difficulty in naming their own children in our Khmer language. The Vietnamese officials usually pressure our Khmer Kram parents to give their children with the Vietnamese name, arguing that like the Khmer name is so difficult to write or pronounce it. This tactic is used to force assimilation from birth. Even the name and the province, one rich in our Khmer history, have been replaced with the Vietnamese name. The Khmer Kram reporter who work for the government media, even that program is in Khmer language. They have to read the name of the province or the village in the Vietnamese. This further erasing our heritage. Secondly, I want to discuss about connection between the language and the right to self-determination. The ability to use and develop one's mother language is directly tied to the right of self-determination. The Khmer Kram, like all indigenous people, have the right to decide how we express our culture, educate our children, and preserve our tradition. However, without control over our language, we are being forced to assimilate into Vietnamese society against our will. So Vietnam policies are designed to erase our Khmer Kram identity by making our language obsolete. If people cannot speak, write, or learn their mother tongue, they gradually lose the connection to the ancestor, the history, and the collective identity. We have already seen this happen to the indigenous Cham people in central Vietnam, whose entire civilization, the Champa kingdom, was wiped off from the world map. The Vietnamese government is using the same tactic to erase the Khmer Kram and other indigenous groups. As we know that without linguistic self-determination, there is no cultural survival. And without cultural survival, there is no true self-determination. Thirdly, I would like to briefly discuss the impact of the language suppression on the Khmer Kram as follows. The forced exclusion of the Khmer language has served the consequence of our people. First one is the loss of literacy. Most young Khmer Kram cannot read and write our own language now because they cannot give an opportunity to learn this in the public school. And most of our people can learn and write our language is in our own temple. Secondly, about religious assimilation. Our Hmong are forced practice Altera Buddhism under Vietnam Buddhist Sangha, the state-controlled organization. The Khmer Krom Buddhist monks are forced to use only Vietnamese in official temple document, Buddhist ID, temple stamp, and sadly, in some temple, we have seen some of our Buddhist monks start chanting in the Vietnamese name, and that's a heartbreaking for us. The third one about cultural erosion, without language, tradition, custom, folklore, or oral history are disappearing. The fourth one, the last one, is about economic and social disadvantage. The Khmer Krom students struggle academically because their mother tongue is not given formal education, making it harder for them to succeed in the Vietnamese society. If this policy continues, the Khmer Krom will face completely cultural assimilation within a few generations. So therefore, to safeguard the survival of our language, Vietnam must implement a policy that respects linguistic diversity and uphold the right of indigenous people. I strongly recommend the following 6 essential steps. One is about the bilingual education program. The implement of Khmer Vietnamese bilingual education in all Khmer Krom public area, similar to successful model in Singapore or other multilingual nations. This will ensure that the Khmer Krom students become fluent in both their native language and Vietnamese. Second, the official recognition of the English language. Vietnam must officially recognize the Khmer as an English language and protect its use in public school, media, or public life. The third one is expand of the Khmer language instruction. The current 2 to 4 hours per week is not enough. The Khmer language should be integrated into the curriculum as a core subject. The fourth one is about the development of the Khmer language in media. Establish the Khmer language newspaper, radio station, or digital media outlet to ensure access to the information in Khmer freely. The fifth one is about the religious cultural protection. Stop forced replacement of the Khmer language in Buddhist temple and allow religious leaders to use the native language in all religious and administrative matters. The last one is about assimilation policy. It's extremely important to us. Vietnam must stop policy that force indigenous people to abandon their language and culture. Instead, the government should promote and protect linguistic diversity as enshrined in the international human rights standard, especially in the treaty that Vietnam ratified with the UN, including the UN Declaration on the Right of Indigenous People. So to conclude, I would like to make a call to action as follows. The Khmer language is at risk of disappearing due to statistic policy designated to assimilate our people into the dominant society. The language is more than just work. It's a foundation of the identity, culture, and history. Without it, our people exist. Vietnam must uphold its international obligation and respect the linguistic right of the Khmer Krom and other indigenous community. It's a time to move beyond work and take real action to protect and promote linguistic diversity. And the survival of Khmer language is not just about preserving our Khmer Krom culture. It is about justice, dignity, and the right of Khmer Krom to exist in our own terms. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mani, for your participation and also for such deep insights. We really appreciate the opportunity to also learn more about the Khmer Krom's situation. And before we go on to the final remarks and possible questions from the audience, we will go on to our last speaker. I'm Murad, representing the Kabyle people. Murad is currently the Chief of Staff of the President of the Kabyle government in exile, and will be sharing insights on these people. Murad, if you cannot share your camera, please don't worry, but please go ahead.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you for the fellow speakers. I learned quite a lot about the situation of the languages of Catalonia, Khmer Krom, and Baluchistan. Thank you very much for them. I'm not going to be very long because quite a lot of information, and I take first of all this opportunity to wish to all members of UNPO a very happy day of languages and a lot of strength to fight for their mother tongue language. Why? Because one of the way of killing a people is to say that it has no language. If a people has no language, it does not exist as such. It is only a part of another bigger group. The denial of its language is just a basis for the denial of its existence, its own existence. Language defines its people and it affirms its uniqueness, giving it a legal basis for the right to self-determination. That's more or less what we globally think us as Kabyle people, and what happened to our language since 1962, the independence of Algeria. I just want to remind everyone, because you may not know, Kabylia is an African people, is an African land, an African nation. It is colonized by Algeria. And Kabyle people, whose mother tongue is Kabyle, is still not recognized. These have gone, and the fight, the struggle has gone through three stages since independence of Algeria. First was total negation from the Algerian government. There was at that time only one radio station in a French colonial legacy, whose infrastructure never been renewed or reinforced for almost 30 years. Its broadcasting range did not cover the whole of Kabylia. A few villagers had to go close to electric pillars or pylons to listen to to listen to this radio. And then Algeria, in the same acting of all the colonial nations, reduced the time of broadcasting. During the French colonial time, the radio was broadcasting all day long, and during and after that, Algeria reduced to few hours a day. Kabyle were subjected to political terror in the 17th. Had to resort to a subterfuge that saved them for a few years before they were caught in their own trap. This is the history of our language and of the Kabyle people. Basically, to defend our identity and culture, instead of claiming our forbidden Kabylity in the 70s and onwards, we began to claim our Berber identity. And the Algerian authority retorted that Berber was merely a dialect derived from Arabic language, which is not. The Kabyles who, to escape repression, represented themselves as Amazigh or Berber. They were diluting themselves into something other than their own. But this denied them the right to be a people, since they were only a part of a great Berber people of which they were part. It was the success of the school boycott that won recognition of Berber or Tamazight. Berber and Tamazight is the same thing, as a language in 1995, that opened their eyes to the fact that Berber was not a single language, but a family of dozens of languages, including their own. It is at the arrival of the MAC, of my political movement, on the political scene in June 2001, for the demand of autonomy, at the beginning, then self-determination to bring things back into line with the natural course of history and to decree for the future of Kabylia that its national and official language would be Kabylian, only Kabyl, our Kabyl language. So it is that for the Algerian authority, in order to continue to deny the existence of a Kabyl people, but under pressure from the MAC, Berber has been constitutionalized as national language, as the Catalan in Spain. But Arabic in Algeria, which is the main language, has the status of national and official language. It was after Morocco recognized the statute for Berber as a national and official language that Algeria was forced to do the same in its constitution, but never in practice. What do I mean? It's obviously the fact that Berber is recognized as a constitutional, as an official and constitutional language, but in practice, basically, the administration don't use it, the judicial system don't use it. It's obviously just there on paper, on constitution, but the constitution is not applied. So this is how Algeria behaves. So basically, just to conclude, Algeria continues to deny the Kabyle people their right to self-determination by denying them their language. So I wanted to thank you all, and to thank particularly the UNPO organizers of this broadcast. Thank you particularly to also my fellow speakers, because I learned quite a lot. Thank you very much. I think if you have any question, I will be very happy to answer. Thank you, Wefes. I give you back the speaker.
Thank you so much, Murad. Before we conclude, would any of our speakers like to make some concluding remarks or address any of the comments or questions on the chat? Yes, Jordi?
Yes, thank you very much. There was one specific question about the Catalan language, which is about the new Catalan citizens, those who come from abroad. As I mentioned, many of them do speak or wish to learn Catalan. And as I also mentioned, because of the growth in population, there are more Catalan speakers than ever. However, there are some communities that are more motivated than others. And the specific question was about the Amazigh, the Berbers, which I imagine includes the Kabyle people. They tend to understand the situation of the language because they have a common issue, as Murad has just described, so that they understand that Catalan is minoritized, though not minority language. Another question that has come up, which is that the internet would be a fantastic tool. It's not a bad tool. The problem that we have here in particular is that although the content has grown considerably, I mean, for example, Wikipedia is the 20th language, Catalan is the 20th language on Wikipedia. Obviously, this goes up and down depending on, some languages grow more in spouts, but around the 20th biggest language after English, Mandarin, Arabic, Spanish, etc. However, the problem that I see, and many people here see, is that, for example, the content creators in youth channels on YouTube, on TikTok, etc., although there is Catalan content, it's much less than in what I would describe as more formal Wikipedia. And as they grow, they come to the conclusion that they have a broader audience if they produce content in Catalan, in Spanish, sorry. And this is a big problem as well, because there are many Catalan people who speak Catalan and who may have Catalan as their first language and even want and use Catalan almost all the time. They will go online and produce content in Spanish, unfortunately. So there's a double-edged sword there on the internet. And finally, Mohand, they understood immediately on which side their bread is buttered. I agree. And I think that building prestige of a language, and this is in general, not just Catalan, building the prestige of a minoritized language is extremely important. And that begins with all Catalan speakers speaking Catalan wherever and whenever. For the businesses led by Catalan speakers who have some kind of commitment to the language, that their businesses are run in Catalan, etc. And so that, you know, if you go into a shop, if they don't understand you, you turn around. That's my policy, personal. If they don't wish to understand and don't want to accept that I speak to them in Catalan, at the very least, I turn around and walk out and find another shop. As I say, they need to find out on which side their bread is buttered. Very good phrase there. And to sum up, thank you very much, the UNPO, for the opportunity to explain the situation, our situation in the different communities.
Thank you so much, Jordi. Anyone else would like to give closing remarks?
Yeah, I can see one question in the chat about Baluchi language, Catalan also. What part does the language aspect play in the armed struggle of independence? Baluchi language, I earlier said that there was a linguicide before year 2000s, and it was like the youths were trying to learn Urdu, international languages, and trying to abandon Baluchi language and Baluch identity. But when the war started this time, and it was in the end of 1999 that it started, when the Army Chief General Musharraf thrown the civilian government and took over the country and suppressed every voice which was rising from Baluchistan. They have their own national anthem. The independence movement has their own national anthem, which is in Baluchi. And Baluchi language and Brahui language also, they both came up to a great level than before. Baluchi language is playing a key role, like when the Baluchi music, their songs, their literature, what they write for themselves to each other, they're using the Baluchi language in Brahui. But other many languages which people speak, they are going downward. And I think it will be a great thing. I thank UNPO for this event, and I have been working with UNPO many times. And I think if in today's world there will be any possibility to team up with the people who are working for the indigenous languages and find some opportunities of information technology and some more advanced things to like bring up these languages up, that will be a great thing to do if we can do it in the platform of UNPO at any point of the time. I can see my amazing colleagues have spoken very well for many languages, which I knew these languages because I'm a student of linguistics, but I didn't know this much, which I knew in this. But I know if we gather for a longer time and for a better purpose, we can learn more and we can do more to save these languages. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Taj. Murad?
Yes, I thank you, Jordi, for your intervention, and I appreciate a few things you said. Just I wanted to explain that the Amazigh language is a family of languages. Is like Catalan is a Latin language. Basically, you share some roots with the, I don't know, the French, the Portuguese, the Italians, and we had, as Amazigh, our parents had to fight for not Kabyle, but for Amazigh language, as if Catalan, the repression was so strong that you couldn't speak Catalan. You couldn't defend Catalan. You had to defend the Latin language, just because the word Catalan is forbidden. So you say Latin. That was one explanation. And the other thing I want to say that, so this Amazigh language is an African language. We are very proud of being African and deeply rooted in Africa. And also, it's a very oral language, oral tradition. So thank you, Jordi, for mentioning basically the internet, and because a lot of Kabyle people do some broadcasting on the internet, on TikTok, on YouTube, stuff, on everything, on politics, obviously, but culture, cuisine, whatever. That's very good, and all the mistakes we have done. So now on this day, I wish to all the people who are close to us in the UNPO to go deep and strong for their own language and to defend it hard and to struggle for it. That's the way of getting self-determination and respect and dignity for our people. Yes.
Thank you so much, Murad.
Thank you.
And lastly, Moni, do you have closing words?
Yes, so we can see that today's discussion has highlighted many UNPO members face the same struggle against the language suppression, right? So my question to the UNPO staff here is like, what are the next steps that UNPO plan to take with the information shared today? And is there a plan to publish any document or report on the language suppression faced by the UNPO member?
Thank you, Moni. I think on that note, I will hand the floor to Elisenda, who will be giving the closing remarks and might share a little bit on the UNPO's next steps and also upcoming activities for the rest of the year.
Hi, thank you, all of you. I think to wrap up a little bit the discussion here, that was extremely interesting, and that shown again that we share the same problems. Maybe the scale of the problems is different, but the problems are the same for all people belonging to the UNPO. We face the same struggles. I wanted to wrap up a little bit on this relationship between language identity and self-determination right. It is clear that the need to protect our identities and our cultures and our language is one of the main reasons for self-determination, because self-determination includes the right to choose our linguistic policies. And without the capacity to decide on linguistic policy, on education system, on the language of instruction, on the language of the administration, on what we are asking to the firms in their use of languages, so what states do, it is very difficult to protect languages. So it is one of the needs, but at the same time, the fact that we are denied the right of self-determination, the fact that the assimilation policies are undermining our languages, are making our survival, the survival thing appeared in some of the discussions here, in some of the interventions. If we are not able to survive as a people, then self-determination is not going to be possible anymore, because self-determination is also linked to the democratic principle. So it is it stresses the importance of language and the preservation of our identity and our cultural characteristics, and how both things are so much intertwined. And also it explains why oppressor states under attack. Firstly, the language. They are obsessed against language because attacking language represents, in the end, being able to win, no? to make us disappear. There was a question in the audience from an Irish woman, I think, Maya. She was saying how that if language is so crucial, and comparing it to the Irish struggle, no? It is true that there are exceptions to what I said. In Scotland and in Ireland, language has been, I wouldn't say hasn't disappeared, but it has been reduced a lot. And that doesn't mean that they are not still, Ireland is independent, Northern Ireland, with the unification, they are doing quite well. And in Scotland, the pro-independence movement is quite important, although it expresses itself in English, no? So there are exceptions to what I just said, but in general, for many of our peoples, language is a core value of our identity and of our struggles. So yeah, I think it's important that the UNPO takes this issue into account. We have one of our campaigns is focusing on language and culture and preservation of history, and yeah, and some things that have been said here about like the use of new tools, artificial intelligence programs. This has to be an ally for our causes and our languages rather than a risk, and we have to be able to be able to use these tools in favor of our languages. So we will discuss it in the board, in the presidents, in the secretariat, and we will try to do as much as we can in this respect. Thank you all, and thank you, Nieves, and maybe I leave you to conclude now, Nieves.
Yes, thank you so much, Elisenda, and thank you to our speakers and the audience. As we mentioned before, this is part of a larger webinar series that we just launched today. So we're very happy to have started off the series with such an interesting issue. The next webinar will be on the 22nd of April in the framework of International Mother Earth Day. So we will be addressing issues related to climate change, the climate crisis, and we will be inviting other UNPO members. So please follow us on social media, subscribe to our newsletter if you haven't still, and to stay tuned for our upcoming activities. And we will definitely keep publishing press releases and reports on these issues. So thank you to our speakers for this amazing contribution. Yes, Elisenda?
I just saw a question from another person in the audience in the chat. He says that we are using English, which is also a dominant language that has oppressed many languages in the world. And yeah, he's completely right. And maybe we have to try to be also multilingual in our public events, and using tools that nowadays are easier to get, of direct translations and subtitles and so on, and be able to use our language. I take the criticism from one of our of the people that was listening to us, and we will try to take that into account. Thank you.
Definitely. Thank you so much to the audience, and thank you, Elisenda. Thank you, Navashna, as well, our legal and policy officer, and to all of our speakers. And we look forward to seeing you all again in our next webinar in April.